Our next guest is the first leader of the majority in the Senate of the Republic of Kenya. Aaron, is this the second Senate or the third Senate or the what?
This is fourth Senate.
This is the fourth Senate.
3 under the new constitution, and the first one was the one that was abolished in, I think, 1965 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, so this is the fourth.
Okay.
Yeah.
The majority leader of the fourth Senate
of
the Republic, Aaron Cheruiyot, is also the senator for Cheruiyot County, is our guest. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you here again.
Good, thank you.
Always good to have conversations with you.
Yeah.
City.
Yes.
Please take Mheshimiwa to Nouakchott.
Yes, we are in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania.
Mauritania.
Yes.
Okay.
And I was regaling my colleagues here with a phrase I found interesting. Is all the names of the top-ranking officials, from President, Prime Minister, and the President of the National Assembly, first of all, they all called Mohammed. Okay, number one. And then their second name was Ould. And I was wondering, how is it?
How
Mohammed,
old
I can
are they?
understand. It's O-U-L-D. How is it? So I looked it up. Old here means son of. So President is Mohammed, son of Gazaounani. Prime Minister is Mohammed, son of Bilal. President of the National Assembly is Mohammed, son of Magnet. So, right. And the proverb.
Uh-huh.
He who begins a conversation does not always see the end.
He who begins a conversation does not always see the end.
Okay.
What's the interpretation?
Conversations never end. I think human beings, they have a sell-by date. We are here today. If you're lucky, a few more decades. But then the conversations we begin will always be here. So the others who will carry it on. That's my little interpretation.
It's a very unique interpretation, but it has depth. Because when you talk about the memories of people and legacy, it's their conversation we're talking about.
And the things they say,
yes,
what they did.
Because what they say often leads to what they will then do. So yes, it lives on.
It's a good one.
Yes. You see some of you'll see the end of some, but then you will never see the end of some. Yes, but that's where the word legacy then comes in. Because now you're talking about a continuity, even though that person's life is no longer with you. Yes.
Yeah, I thought so too.
You're in the leadership of the legislature.
Yes, Eric.
All the spotlight is on the National Assembly, but also even the Senate. As senators, we are still looking at you. All of you are representatives of the people.
Exactly.
And this is the time when the conversation is heated on matters of public finance management, on the budgets for the next financial year, on the proposed expenditures and the proposed revenue generating measures. And the people are speaking. And they have organized to come out onto the streets of Nairobi and other cities and other major towns across the country.
That's right.
Today, like they did last week.
Yes.
What do you hear them saying?
This conversation is very interesting because I hear them say many things. Some accurate, some inaccurate. But by and large, they're saying things are not okay. And they are asking, why are they not okay? And then they have gone ahead to prescribe solutions, or what they believe that if we did this, then we'd get ourselves out of this mess. It's an interesting time in our country because I think people are becoming more conscious and aware of the gravity of the decisions that are being made, sometimes without their input. And they are realizing that eventually it catches up with us. And that's why there's this conversation about the finance bill and the move to reject it in its totality. My honest view and opinion on this is that they have the diagnosis accurate. They only are wrong on what they are prescribing as a solution. Because unfortunately where we are, and we have to be realistic and honest with each other. People are saying to me, everywhere I meet people in supermarkets, in hospitals, in corridors, when I walked in here, are you reject or are you support? And I tell them honestly, I am support 100%. And they ask me why. Because I say, you guys haven't thought through what will be the consequences of reject. I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense that there is high levels of unemployment. We feel that you're overtaxing us. There's corruption, wastage of public resources. Systems don't work in this country, and all those things. And it's boiled down to now being proposed that if you reject the finance bill, suddenly all those problems will go away. In fact, it looks to me like we are turning the finance bill into that dawa ya kibuyu, the one that Masais walk around with. And when you tell them, I have a headache, they say, just drink it, you'll be okay. If it's a tummy, it works even better. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. Where we are, good people, is that we are in a debt distress period. Unfortunately, we are working so hard to repay, first of all, debt, but more importantly, is to avoid a default, because the consequences of a default will be more severe and more dire than what people are talking about presently. A default on any of the debts that we have, and you have to be knowledgeable to know that the bulk of it actually is from the local market, meaning that you default, that means it's the banks who have bought treasury bills and infrastructure bonds. Therefore, you get into a solvency challenges space. Now you go into the bank, you know very well that you have 10,000, but the bank begins negotiating with you and say, please take one. We are still trying to get money. Or pension funds, which have invested actually in government paper, and they tell the pensioners at the end of the month, sorry, we can't pay you, things are bad. It will be an implosion, both locally and internationally for us. We basically, when you tell us to reject, you are telling us, let's go the Greece, the Argentina, the Zimbabwe way.
Is that what it means?
Exactly. That's how bad.
If you reject the bill, what exactly would it translate to?
You reject the bill basically means you deny the country a resource envelope of anywhere between 260. Initially, the target was 300 and 339. But because of the conversations that have been had and many of those proposals have been dropped, remember the issue on bread, motor vehicles circulation, charges on financial transfers, and a few other things that were dropped along the way, then they have lost, I think, about 40 or 45 billion out of that, deductions out of the target. So they'll have to find a way of recovering it, because at the end of the day, we had budgeted for it, but now we've been told that will not be available. So the first point of call on supplementary one, which comes on or about in September, but this time has to be brought early, is that you've got to shave off, first of all, 45 billion. Then you're left with about...
But why wait for the supplementary bill? You have not passed the appropriations.
Sorry?
You have not passed the appropriations.
Yeah, but eventually, because you pass the estimates and whatever follows with it, then depending on the amendments, first of all, in fact, let's be structural.
Yes.
Depending on the amendments that go through today, we will be able to identify and say, this is what we were able to get out of the 330 that we are hunting for. You don't know what might happen in the course of today. Depending on the amount that you lose, then you begin cutting from appropriations onwards to a supplementary eventually. But the question, remember, why I don't want to lose track of the first question that you asked, is that does it mean the grim picture that you're painting is a reality of what will happen should we reject this bill the way we are being told to? It's a question you need to ask yourself, is why are we raising this money? We are raising this money because we are in a situation as such that out of our total revenue collections, immediately you pay interest and you exit salaries. You are left actually with pretty much nothing. you haven't paid the principal amount, you haven't funded counties, you have done zero development. What will be the impact on that to our economy? Basically, you will crash this economy because at the end of the day, who's the largest spender in an economy such as ours?
Government.
It's not the private sector.
No,
it's
not,
government.
It's not just our economy, any economy.
Globally, actually.
Yes.
But ours is more pronounced. We don't have a bigger private sector like other countries do have. You don't pay people salaries, you don't fund counties, then it means situation gets even more severe than what we are. So why are we raising additional resources? We are raising additional resources. Most of it goes to clear historical debts that we are trying hard to pay. We are managing it through the reduction of a fiscal deficit, which you guys understand, which is the difference between what you raise and what you intend to spend, the balance of the revenue side and the expenditure. We have demonstrated to the country, and unfortunately this conversation is now lost. It's no longer about numbers, unfortunately, which is a sad thing, because when you're discussing a budget and a finance bill, it should be about absolutes. It shouldn't be about what I feel and what you guys are doing. We have demonstrated year on year from our coming into office that we have reduced our fiscal deficit from upwards of 8.5, 7.5. Those are the numbers and the figures that we used to hit between 2017 and even previously to that. We did 5.6 last financial year, though we had projected even way lesser than that. Unfortunately, due to fluctuations on Forex and the same, it ended up going beyond 5%. This year, the budget that has been laid out, we are going to the financial markets to borrow about 572, 333 locally, and I think 297 from the external markets. Calculates that, it turns out to about 3.3%. All going well, and I don't think we are likely to get that because of these challenges that we are currently facing. Then it means it will take us probably another 3 to 4 years before we do what is called a balanced budget, because eventually that is what we must be able to do. But as it is today, Eric, we'll be lying to ourselves to say that we cannot borrow zero, because even if we didn't borrow and we didn't do nothing, I have demonstrated to you by way of numbers, and I can do that further, is that the subsequent of that will be a default. And I have told you,
because we will not have money
to pay
the debt.
Pay the debt.
Okay.
That's a problem. And that's why let's also try and pause and listen to each other. You know, we are being told, listen to these young people. And I was saying, okay. And I like that they are speaking. By the way, they've also provided a silver lining in my honest opinion, because there was a conviction that we need to live within our means. Now we've been left with no option. We have to do it. And if the president, for whatever reason, was looking for the perfect storm to make him make extremely difficult decisions, which I think he has struggled with making, then he has the perfect
Now he has a reason to.
opportunity out of what the young people are doing.
So, Senator, one of the things that comes up here, and some of the things that you've mentioned as well, I mean, a debt audit, first of all, is a big issue here. We know the conditionalities upon which Kenya has prescribed that debt or loans can be taken. You borrow for two things. We already know what those are. So essentially what we're doing here, very simply, is that you increase the amount of taxes that you levy on your people to be able to pay for some of these things that you've spoken about. That's clear. 1 + 1 = 2. It's not difficult to see. However, one of the overarching questions is Kenyans essentially are being asked to pay for something that we've not seen very clearly where that money went. Doesn't matter if it was government 10 years ago, 20 years ago, doesn't matter. But that Kenyans today, because you would agree with me, and I always say that if you were to put 100 billion shillings in the economy today, would you feel it? You'd feel it, development-wise, right? You would see it. You would see something.
That's part of the reasons why we are doing what you're doing.
You would see it, right? So if we're talking about trillion shillings, trillion shillings, you would definitely see it. right? So today in 2024, Kenyans are being asked to pay. Essentially, what you're being asked to pay is the debt. You're paying the debt for something you cannot see. That's one of the issues, and I'm sure you've heard this. How can we answer that question prudently? Number 2, government expenditure is wasteful. It's not a maybe or imaginary. It is wasteful. There's a lot of money that's being spent that needn't be spent. How can you speak and act in the same language? And I think those things need to be very clear. We cannot see some of the numbers that we are talking about here and then also ask Kenyans to pay this kind of money when government expenditure through the roof. Some of the government's own advisors have admitted that for real, spending too much money that needn't be spent, not cutting the cloth according to the coat size, is not happening. Those 2 things are pain points. So it's really not just young people running around the streets. There are actually valid demands that are being made here. Answer those questions. There's a debt audit, for example, an expenditure audit. Some of the things that we see actually not happening, for which we are told these taxes are being collected for, the payment of debt and for things to be done in the country. I don't even want to start about things like education and health. So do you see how all of these things come about to confuse the mind of people? When on one hand you're saying, Senator Aaron Cheruiyot is saying, we have to pay these things. We get it. But then on this other hand, we're not seeing that there's responsible spending. We are not seeing that there is responsible collection of data and sharing of this data when it comes to how the monies have been spent. Can you see how it would confuse people?
On the 2 occasions that the debt question has come to Parliament, not this term, it was a previous term, I voted to reject an extension or an opening of our debt ceiling. Why did I do that? Because at that time, I was a member of Budget and Finance Committee. And when we interrogated our debt exposure, there were the telltale signs that all was not well. For the very reasons that you've stated. Number 1, we couldn't peg on projects to shilling of what we were paying for. Because we asked, and I was a member of Budget and Finance Committee last time on the 2 occasions that the debt ceiling requirement, first, I think, was to move it from 4 to 6.5, and then from 6.5 to 10. On both occasions, check the records of Parliament, I said, no, don't allow this. Because we couldn't link the spending of that money that you're borrowing to specific and actual projects. Second and most important thing is that the people at Treasury at that time, when we asked for our debt register, it was brought to us on an Excel sheet. And I think I've said that before on this show. And that really got me worried because I thought probably it would be something more complex, like a magic box that you bring and say, this is, it's because it's the most important document or item that you have as a country because it's causing you a lot of distress. But it's in an Excel sheet. And therefore, we're being told that time we still had favorable economic situation. Therefore, we could borrow even from the financial markets. Unlike right now, where only the multilateral lenders can listen to us. Therefore, those debt owed to I don't know which company in which country and what percentage. That really got me worried. I pleaded, and a good number of our colleagues, perhaps hardly 10, listened to us. Unfortunately, that is where this trouble that you're facing began. In fact, that's why I'm saying Kenyans follow us through this conversation, but also don't lose sight of history. I see our colleagues, even from the minority side, saying, oh, we are heroes. We voted no on reject. There's no hero in voting no on reject. In fact, if you vote now, no, you're exasperating an already worse situation. The time to reject was that 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, which unfortunately, all our major political parties at that time, including ODM, that I see many of its leaders very loud and coming to the show, telling people, oh, come to parliament and reject and occupy, voted in support. That's history. And history is important for context so that people don't get confused. Because unfortunately, one of the problems we face as a country is that the very people that put us into problems find a way of wiggling their way out, and come and speak nice and soft English before Eric. And Eric listens and says, okay, well and good, what do we do? So we must not forget where we left. Therefore, I agree that a debt audit is something that we cannot avoid in this day and time. And it's part of the conversations, because I've had people say that over and above the proposals that are being made, I had the president say, I'd listen to the young people. I haven't had it in their list of demands because, unfortunately, they're being made in various forms and fashions, expletives in between and all this. But so you struggle sometimes to understand what exactly is being said. And I haven't had this proposal come to the table. This is something that we cannot avoid as a country. There could be a possibility that part of this debt that you're paying, and remember what retired Auditor General Okoh once told us, I think around 2015 or something about the time, that part of the proceeds of this debt, they actually never made their way into Kenya. And that's captured and on record. So as a way out, before even beginning any of this conversation,
A debt audit.
a forensic debt audit is imperative. We cannot avoid that.
We have had this conversation even with you here before.
Yes.
We have had the conversation. We've asked the president this question directly to him, and he has said, "Yeah, it's important for us to look at, to audit our debt, because it's the single biggest thing that is giving me headaches on a daily basis. How to manage and how to make sure that we don't go into a default." He has said it many times. Why is it not happening? What would it take to actually initiate a forensic debt audit?
You needed Gen Z.
Why?
Probably the pressure needed to get to the levels that they have gotten to.
So this is a good thing that's happening right now, because it's going to force people to do what they should have done.
That's why I've said there's a silver lining in this thing, despite whatever else challenges and whatever people are talking about. We cannot avoid. And as a first concession to the president, if indeed, like he has said, I have listened and I need to engage you further, is a forensic audit of our debt, because we or nobody can confidently point out and say this is what was done by this exact amount that was borrowed. Probably you can point out to a few things. We have the SGR, we have this road, we have the other, but then it doesn't sum up to 10 trillion.
No, it doesn't.
But Senator,
City?
Senator, one of the things that characterized the executive, more so the president and his deputy when they came to power, was the constant repetition of the huge deficit they found when they got into power. And it was repeated over and over again. I would have assumed that if this was as daunting as we were told it was, that the very discussion we're having now should have followed immediately. We have this problem and we owe. Let's understand why we owe it. Okay, that did not happen. We then find ourselves in this situation here where discussions went even further, and we started talking about what we call an odious debt. Asking the fundamental question, do we really owe this money that we're being told we owe? Because our law clearly states what we borrow for. Is there money that we are told we're being paid for, and we cannot even find the documentation? The mentioned by the former Auditor General, money not coming into Kenya. Other monies that perhaps even flaunted further rules where you don't see Parliament approving that particular process, and yet money was borrowed. Most of this was in the previous government. No audit. Now, one could argue that the house has already bolted. The stable door has been opened and has bolted. I actually don't think so. And I'm going to tell you why I don't think so. If the situation we find ourselves in has been catalyzed by the demonstrations that we now see, then much as we may see that, yes, it appears that some pressure is now being applied for change, well, then so be it. It is far better if the executive takes charge of the change than if the change acquires its own momentum. Because it is difficult. And the president has said over and over, some difficult decisions must be made. Now, it's been talk. Here we are. Eric mentioned the previous hour, and he talked about the appropriation bill. This hasn't been passed yet, has it?
Not yet.
Precisely.
It gets passed on Wednesday.
Yeah, precisely. Now, if we look at jurisdictions that are maturer, this is the bill that has gotten prime ministers to resign and governments to step down. This one here. It did that in Australia. It's happened in the UK. Okay? Now, this is the bill that allows people to spend. You're told,
Once this is passed, you have authority
now,
to spend.
There's still wiggling room. So the debate, and from what you've just said, and I'm in full agreement with you. You see, even when we were last here, we did agree. We said, look, when we talk here, it is clear what must be said. Why then is that conversation not carried on so that the citizenry are on the same page? Huh? Because now we're looking back and saying, but this is something that could have been explained. This is something that could have been stated. It was not stated. And yet, the knowledge of what should be stated was with us. Now, it's not too late. It's just that the conversation we said was going to be difficult. It's going to be much, much more difficult. But it must be had. We're talking in the morning when we're having tea. That Nyahururu incident, the president had an opportunity to talk to those people. He should have. They were there. And they were willing to talk to him. They were willing to listen. They were there. He should have talked. The president knows how to talk to people. He knows how to engage. He knows. It's a gift he has.
If I dovetail on that, Senator, and just ask a question then, so because it is clear, and I think it's just how governments work, that there will be groups of individuals that lend their support to the executive. Whether you're in the Senate, whether you're in the whether you're in the National Assembly, we already know, we can see, and it's very clear where support lies. And some of the things also are so real that they can hit you in the face, which you've admitted to already. You can see, it's clear that there's a problem here. Advice cannot only be against something. Advice can also be for something. In my language, we say it is only your sister who will tell you that your mouth is smelly. In this case, for example, when we talk about government expenditure, which is our other question, how does it look to folks whereby you say, we're spending so much money and we don't have it? Does that word of advice come and say, guys, this one we need to look at it and sort it out real quick? It doesn't look right. If for optics alone, how can we fix this? Because we're spending this money, the expenditure's through the roof, and then you're coming to Kenyans tomorrow and you're saying, we're going to tax you a little bit more in order for us to pay debts that we don't even know where they came from. How do those conversations take place?
There's you had us actually, Aliandu, two questions, which still is part of what City and you are saying, that we've discussed this topic on the debt audit, but now you're pegging your second part of the conversation on the rationalization of our expenditure, to see what must be done and what cannot be done at this point, which is what actually, in my humble opinion, I believe is what the conversation should be right now. With all due respect to the people on the street telling us reject is not an option. Like I have said, and I have explained that you reject, you're basically telling us, let's go the Greece, let's go Argentina, let's go the Zimbabwe way. The consequences for that will be more dire than what actually you're seeing. What the conversation should be, because you have done an excellent job in painting the picture of what the challenges in the country are. So what would be the solution? The solution is what is being proposed on this table, that a relook on our expenditure is what needs to be done. Are we really saying that we must spend that 3.9 that has been read out? And where is it that we can cut? You know, I see people try to reduce this conversation about 600 for renovations in the DP's office and I don't know, office of the First Lady and whatnot and so on. It will be right in the sense of as a show of goodwill and responsibility. But that's not where the big ticket is, unfortunately, because you could remove all that, but you're talking about take it or leave it, 2 or 3 billion Kenya shillings. That's not where the problem is.
It's the optics.
I have said it is important for the moral question to be answered on that.
It's how it looks.
Yes, exactly. That's why I call it a moral question.
Yep.
But the real question to be answered is, where is it that these monies that you're spending are going to? You have removed debt, which you have said, unfortunately, much as we audit, even as we audit, we have to continue paying.
There.
You know, we can't tell the people that we owe money that we know we're supposed to clear by such and such a date. Allow us to do an audit, and we've said as we do that audit, we will resolve. What are our plausible options as of this point? A proper relook into the budget that has been laid before the National Assembly, and say that where is it that we can do further cuts and perhaps either not spend, or if there are savings to be made, then channel that to some of the problems that are being stifled. Take part of that money into paying, we have a serious, apart from debt, we have a serious pending bill challenge, which is part of the problems that are letting people out on the street. Government owes people in excess of close to 700 billion Kenya shillings. And this is services that Kenyans have rendered over the last 6, 7, or 8 years. Most of it, actually, they borrowed from banks. They've been auctioned and things like that. Needs to be a conversation about what do we do on this issue of pending bills, because it's part of the bigger complaint that you listen in on what people are saying, that it no longer makes sense even to work with government. If you want to be depressed and auctioned, try and take on a government contract. So everybody is trying to fight on the private sector, which unfortunately is a very limited
So we should
space.
relook at all these things.
But the expenditure side,
The expenditure.
that
Which
is where
why,
our focus should be.
Senator,
It is not on the reject.
if you remember when I started the first question, I was very deliberate. I did not say that there are protests to reject the finance bill. I said there are protests about our public finance management.
Exactly. You
Because
said
that's what I hear.
yeah.
It's a conversation about our budget, how we spend, and then how we look for the money to spend.
To spend.
again.
Right? It starts with how we spend, how we are planning to spend. And it's the same thing that you're saying now. If we want to go back, if the people said reject finance bill and you rejected it, you're basically forcing the conversation into what are you planning to spend? It is bring back the conversation to what the president keeps saying, cutting the cloth by the coat, say that thing?
Cutting the coat
According to
the
your cloth.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
It is saying this is the actual size of your cloth. Now, can you cut the coat?
Remember,
What we have now is you have virakas that you're adding, and you're saying that this is the new size of our coat. And the people are telling you no. This is not the size of the coat. Can we go back and cut your coat according to this size? That's a conversation. Is the executive willing to listen to that conversation?
they don't have a choice, unfortunately. Like I said, and I keep repeating this, that the silver lining in all this protest and the noise that has come out is that something has to move eventually, for either to bring down the temperatures, to get the young people off the streets, and to listen to each other and have a country once again that you are not making noise on each other and all these things that are happening. The only thing that I have said I disagree is that this campaign is anchored on rejecting the finance bill. I have explained why that is not an option and why that cannot even be part of the solution. Remember, you have anchored this conversation around the challenges that we are facing as a society. And you're saying part of the problem we as young people are out on the streets is that there are no jobs out there. Part of what the finance bill does, and there is good demonstration about how that has been achieved from 2023 and will be achieved even more, is that you've got to incentivize people to come and invest locally. That's why eco levy is being introduced on goods that are being manufactured externally, but nothing on things that are being manufactured locally. Because you're trying, that's what every sensible government does. That's why when Apple is under threat from Huawei, government of the US does whatever they do. They accuse them of all those things they say because they protect
They're
their
protecting
industries.
their Apple. Let me
That's
ask
what
you-
we are trying to do. Therefore, allow me just to finish this point, Eric,
Go on.
that my reading is that a reject is not the solution. The solution lies in a relook into our expenditure, like you have rightfully diagnosed, because we cannot afford 3.9,
Please
which is what the National Assembly.
Please educate us.
Yeah.
Mheshimiwa. If Parliament had voted no last week on Tuesday, by majority, let's even say that by some miracle, all members of parliament present voted no, what would have happened?
The thing is, you would actually just spiral into a collapse of the financial situations, because remember, we are on an IMF and
No. What would it mean? Would it mean that the current existing measures,
the existing, basically what it means? So, okay, this is a thing that people need to understand.
Yeah.
Why do you do a financial bill each year?
Yeah.
You do a finance bill because you're trying to raise additional resources over and above what you already have.
Correct.
So you're saying, out of the tax measures that we have put in up to this point, it can only get us to 2.4 trillion, which is what we are going to achieve in this current financial year.
Yeah.
But you have looked into your books and you've said that is still not commensurate to our needs. Remember, for the very first time in this present financial year, interest alone as a charge to debt has crossed the 1 trillion shilling mark.
Yes.
It's 1.009 for the very first time. Therefore, it tells you you've got to raise additional resources or cut somewhere. But mark you, even in cutting, and I have demonstrated this to you, Eric, there is a beyond which you cannot cut without then constricting the economy to a point where it basically crashes.
So it means,
and I have said, if you cut and think about maybe reduction of counties or these other places, there's a level beyond which you cannot cut without again having sort of like a spiral back effect on you.
Let's look at it.
Okay.
So the current
financial year, because I want to answer your question.
Yeah.
So the reason why, if they had voted no, will basically have denied an extra resource envelope of about 300 billion Kenya shillings. You lose that, unfortunately, then it means you are staring at a default.
Okay.
As soon as probably September,
So let's go through
or July,
numbers, then,
when
step
some
by
of these debts begin to pile up.
Let's go through the numbers step by step. This current financial year, 2023-2024, the current taxation measures brought a projection from the National Treasury of raising about, 2.4?
No, it was 2.7, but they will only succeed to do 2.3 or 2.4 maximum.
At the very best.
At the very best.
So it was projecting 2.7.
Yes.
In their projections.
Yes.
To raise 2.7 trillion shillings.
Exactly.
They are likely to end up at 2.3.
2.4.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we against the budget for this year of 3.6
3.6 trillion. Okay. Exactly.
And in this financial year, our debt repayments have been how much in total? 1.8 trillion?
About 1.4.
The principal plus interest.
Principal plus interest, takes it to 1.8.
About 1.8 trillion.
Yes.
And our salaries are about
612. Salaries alone, salaries and wages is 612.
Salaries and wages 612 billion.
Counties 385.
385 for counties.
Pensions 230 or something.
234 pensions.
Yes. Remember, you haven't done development.
We haven't done any development.
No recurrent. And development, there are two types of development. There's development that is ongoing, which you need to continue to pay for.
Yes.
And new development.
New development projects.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what we're working with in this current financial year.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Including buying new cars, new Lexus.
All those things.
And including repairing
State House and Parliament.
And buying salmon for Karen and such. Okay? Such kind of things. Right? Can we do the same without raising an extra 300 billion shillings?
It is not possible.
Why? How much are we expected now to pay in debt in the next financial year?
In the next financial year, like I have told you, our interest alone is 1.9 trillion.
Right.
Then
principal.
That's principal. Then we have another charge of about 430. 1 second, 434 on the principal amount.
Okay.
Then you have 600 and, like I've mentioned, wages and salaries are constant.
Still the same.
613.
So it's about the same 1.7 trillion in the next year for debt.
Exactly.
Principal plus, which is less by 1 billion.
Yes.
By 100 billion.
Yes.
On this kind of current financial year. Our salaries remain the same.
613. And of course, there's the yearly increment that civil servants earn and all that. But it's a negligible number, not a big difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the same pensions, the same
Pensions 200,
increase a bit more
counties,
for counties 400,
444,
and the rest.
Yes,
Is it possible for us to cut some things and still operate on a 3.6 trillion shilling budget?
we should.
So that's
That's why now I
if
say
we can do another 3.6 trillion shilling budget this year.
Yeah.
It means that we can still operate with the tax measures of the last year.
though how practical that will be is a question that you need to ask, because remember, I have already pointed out that there's a demonstration. Remember, we are on an and I don't know why I keep hearing people say, oh, reject IMF and World Bank policies. It's not like it's them who do our budget. In fact, some of our policies, they don't even agree with us. And we have pointed, case in point, the G2G government oil deal. They went to the length and breadth of everything that was possible to say you cannot execute this without crashing the economy. Months later, after this has been done and proven that part of the reason why we are among the very few countries that have gained against the dollar while the rest of the countries are struggling against it is because you are able to manage that month-on-month pressure that we used to. In fact, to the contrary, they're the ones now that are sending people to our country and say, go and study what Kenya did on this program. They didn't agree with us.
So World Bank wants us to spend 300 billion shillings more in the next financial year.
Please, Eric, why don't you take time to also...
Because I just asked the question. Can we operate on another 3.6 trillion shillings in the next financial year?
Sorry?
If yes, if we can do another 3.6 trillion shilling budget in the next financial year, it means that we do not need an additional tax measures. We can operate the same way, same deficit, same, hopefully the next year KRA does better. Instead of 2.3, they can raise 2.5, which can reduce our deficit.
Who tells you they will do that? That's not how you do a budget. That's why you have to do this. That's why there's
because
something...
their revenue projection was 2.7 trillion.
That's why there's something called a supplementary, so that you see how you're performing. You know, how do we do our annual budget cycle? You start with a higher projection and say, we think we'll achieve this. By the first 3 months, between July, August, and September, you are able to see what is possible and what is not possible. That's why year on year, between September and October, you have your first supplementary, and most of it is always a cut. By the time you get to half year,
I just see it as a lie. I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I see it as a lie because the Treasury comes and lies to Parliament that we think we can raise this amount of money and so therefore allow us to spend this amount of money. Then the Treasury comes within 2 months of you approving that and saying,
we need some more supplementary budget.
We don't think we can actually raise this amount, so please allow us to borrow extra.
Which you're saying exactly.
And Parliament.
You're saying exactly.
And every time in April when Parliament is given the budget policy statement.
In February, actually.
In February, yes. The budget committee always says, you lied to us.
Last year.
Yeah. But they still say, go ahead and lie to us again this year.
Which is precisely the point that I said when opening the show. That it was possible over the years to continue living the lie and being convenient with each other and saying, okay, let's kick the can down the road. But unfortunately, the water has come up to our neck level.
So, can I ask, Senator? Because this is why I asked that question about the people that you are with every day advising each other. There's something you said fundamentally, and I'm going to have to ask for it to be recorded so we can play it back here. You said that it was necessary for them to be at the drawing board to discuss some of these things. So, as opposed to saying that we're going to vote, because the same fault can be placed. Those that you say are voting blanketly, saying no, the same fault can be placed on those who are blanketly voting yes. Because of the fact that there needs to be some prudent gatekeeping when it comes to how some of these decisions are being made. That is it possible that some of the measures that are being put in place here can actually be restructured and re-looked at and said, actually, guys, this is how we ought to be looking at this thing.
You know, the problem goes beyond just Parliament, and I'll explain to you a simple example. I could point out many others. You know, part of the reason why, and this why 300 billion being sought for is not a give and take of saying just remove and it will be clear, because there are many other things that need to happen for you to make that decision. You know that there has been a proposal to have a privatization program because we have about, I think, 400 state-owned enterprises, about half or 2/3 of which are loss-making or perhaps we can live without. The challenge is each time you try to make a move towards the right decision, And I'll just pick on a simple sector like the sugar industry. We spend as a country, and part of even the budget that's here, 4 to 5 billion Kenya shillings keeping our state-owned sugar mills running, because either they have old machinery, issues of corruption and all these things. There's been a proposal from day one of coming into place of this administration that let's privatize.
Yep.
But you know for a fact that the reason why we cannot privatize is there's a judge seated somewhere in Zoia who probably doesn't have either a sense of how the decision they make affects us generally. And probably they are part of the people now hashtagging reject finance bill, makes a decision and says, no, take your time. We need to consult people. We continue to spend.
Due process.
Follow whatever.
Follow the law.
My friend, there is nothing that hasn't been done. We have even passed a privatization law in parliament, followed it word for word. She's saying you consulted people, but I need to be sure that the people you consulted belong were specifically from this county of Bungoma. You know,
Yes.
if you have the luxury or the kind of pressure that you are dealing with as a country, then we don't have.
You don't have to talk to people.
Sorry?
You don't have to consult the people.
I have told you there was public participation.
Yeah, so demonstrate to the judge.
How I don't know, maybe you need to help us to know how to demonstrate to her. I have seen the court pleadings. They have showed to her minutes of where the meeting happened. And she has said, my diary is full. Let's speak in January of 2025. And I can go on case by case on so many other of these things. That's why I said this conversation cannot just be had within the confines of parliament and the executive. There is a contribution of judiciary as well to this and what we need to do as a country in managing our expenditure. Even this 613 that we are talking about, you know that there have been attempts at rationalizing salaries, because the institutions where you're in the same ministry, you do almost the same job. But when you look at what the CEO of that institution earns vis-a-vis what the next one does, the minute the board appears to be moving towards asking these difficult questions, there's an injunction on the table and you're told, please, you cannot work this salary backwards. What do? That's why it is important for us to be here in this time and moment so that we all post back and say, okay, good people. Because I hear the theme is listen. The church is saying, listen to the young people. Everybody else is saying, listen. I also want to say, listen also, the rest of everyone who's talking, so that we post back and say, okay, we have found ourselves in a difficult situation as a country. What do we do?
Is the president willing to listen? He said so in Nyahururu.
You know...
But let me tell you what I heard the president saying.
Yeah.
He said, hawa vijana ni watoto wetu. And he's happy that our watoto wetu are now participating on matters of governance, on conversations of governance. And I'm okay with that. Where I started feeling with what he was saying is the next thing that he said, but let me explain to you young people. We have increased CDF money so that now you have more bursaries for our children. So we can also, using CDF, create ICT hubs so that our young people can get jobs. We have increased HELB allocation so that you people can go to school. What I heard the president saying is he's still looking at these people as, these are children, shida yao ni shule. Nimeweka pesa mwende shule. Okay?
But he isn't alone in that.
Yeah.
But he's not hearing that these are Kenyans who are saying, actually, let's have a wider conversation. And probably because I know you speak with him, tell him.
That's what I'm saying.
Just the conversation is not, let's not call them Gen Z children.
Or little boys and girls running here and there.
Who can buy KFC,
Yes.
tell your counterpart in the National Assembly. The KFC, and
that conversation isn't helping
completely
anybody.
Of color.
It is about, can we finally, and we've championed it on this show many times, can we have a national conversation where we tell each other the truth about where we are? Where we start with the things that Kenya Kwanza even promised. All these problems, Kenya Kwanza had bottled it into state capture. There was state capture, and that's why they could wantonly go and borrow and eat the money. There was state capture, that's why you could not have institutions even speaking out There was state capture. That's why even the legislature was coyed and into submission. They said we are going to deal with state capture. We are going to even look at extrajudicial killings. All those bodies that were showing up on riverbeds. We're going to look at that. Shakahola, we're going to look at that. We are going to look at our debt and assess how much of this debt is legit. It's been 2 years. None of those things has happened. Can you listen to the people? And stop saying tuta and do now.
Now, in my very honest opinion, I see because you've said you're sending me to the president.
Yes.
And it's fine. The message will get there. But in my honest opinion, there are two mistakes which I don't know whether calling it a mistake is the right thing. But I just want to be honest that in my reading, I feel the president has made. Number one, being the father of the nation doesn't mean that you run the country like an African father. What does an African father do? They do something which we call colloquially dying like a man. That when you have problems piling up on you, you don't come before your kids and cry and say, oh, by the way, let me not lie to you, there's no school fees tomorrow. They do what the traditional folklore of boiling the stone. That you just keep it bubbling until the kids sleep and hope for a better tomorrow. I strongly feel he hasn't done a good job, and the rest of us that serve with him, to unpack all this challenge presently before us, for us as a country to reflect. It has taken this movement of whatever form it is for us to pause and say, what exactly is the issue? So that now people are beginning to sober up and say, we are overspending in this area. Wait a minute. You say there's a debt. What did it do? And all these things. That burden, he's shouldered it on its own and chose to run with it and paint a picture that we shall surmount this while we continue to struggle with it. That's a big mistake in my honest opinion, because I strongly get the sense that people don't appreciate the financial mess and the challenge that you are in as a country and how limited our choices are. You make one wrong mistake, you're out the grease way, and it will take you another 20 to 30 years to get out. We need to appreciate that. Second thing, because he campaigned tough, people believe he will govern tough and won't be gentle and will make the extremely difficult decision and tell people the truth. You know, you have just pointed out something which I agree with. What will be the first place to do the shave? CDF will be, in my honest opinion. And I don't say this because I am a senator and...
Careful, they might hear you.
No, I have said it in our parliamentary group meeting with them seated last week. I said it when we had a retreat of cabinet before, because there are difficult areas that we begin to show our cuts coming from, because people don't make the connection. I hear people, after all that is said and done, they remind him and say, our road from this place to the other is extremely bad. It needs to be fixed. And that last mile project, we need to do this or the other. There needs to be a realization, perhaps, and say, why don't we put a pause to new projects? And whether the young people that are now demonstrating in our CDF offices, it's important that perhaps they equally get a brief and say, okay, if we carry on this campaign, are you willing? And you need to know that this road from this place to this particular place will have to pause for a year or two. This water project, because we can't afford it at this time, let it, so that we stop living the political life while dealing with an economic situation that doesn't warrant us to live that.
They will be okay with it, because they have not seen the roads anyway.
They've had promises of the
No.
Another year.
You can't say that. You can't say that, yet you know that part of this 10 trillion that you're paying is because of the annuity program. We opened it up, the country, and built these roads. Actually, they have not seen the roads for the last 2 years. But before that, they saw it.
For the last 2 years.
Exactly.
We can live another year.
Not only that, I'd take it further. You gave the example of Greece. Anecdotally, it is said that is one of the few countries on the planet where people actually don't like paying taxes. So using it as an example doesn't quite fit here. We actually pay taxes.
And we like it.
Yes, I would have gone
Only that
the Ghana way, no.
only that the numbers don't show.
No,
we
the-
are at 15-16% of as a factor of our GDP.
Bas.
Our peers are doing 20 plus.
How are they doing
Where are
it?
they?
Ghana would be the example I would have given.
Why?
When Ghana defaulted,
Yeah.
the situation in Ghana skyrocketed in the worst possible way, in the worst possible direction.
Yeah.
The people of Ghana are still alive.
But you need to go
No,
there
no.
and see what's happening.
Yes, I see it. With that in mind and as a picture,
Yes.
steps to ensure that you actually in charge of the situation where we start with what you've said. This is what we're going to forgo. So you mentioned all the areas. This is what we're going to do. Halt this, halt this, halt this. And it's seen across board. We come to you and say, Mheshimiwa, we want to urge you to take a pay cut. We want to urge government, meaning let the whole country take the step of saying, okay, but you know what we're going to ask you? What guarantee do we have that the money that we have is going to do what it's supposed to do? Because that is the conversation that is at the heart of everything we're seeing.
Corruption.
Eric called it public finance management. It's a very nice way of summarizing it. Steps can be taken. The difficult decisions must be taken. But, you know, the leadership has to lead. We have to see you making the sacrifices that make sense.
But I have seen this done in the past. I have seen in the year, I think 2009 or 2008, previously under the old dispensation, where civil society and those that were active in that space will present an alternate budget, item line by item line, on what the minister is presenting. Perhaps that's where we need to take this present engagement to, so that we say, okay, out of this 3.9, remove until you get us perhaps somewhere to 3.
Aaron,
So that then we engage at that level.
Aaron,
If let me be honest with you, if you rely on Parliament to do it,
Please continue. No, please.
Okay.
I need you.
Mic drop.
I need you to complete what you were saying.
I have said what I need to say.
Sorry, now that you're because this is great, because on this day you're serving as emissary, and now we can send you with so many things. One thing that might seem like it's a peripheral conversation, but is extremely important, that woke a lot of people up in a lot of sadness this morning, is that there are people who are vocal in their demonstration that are being abducted. This is not a maybe situation. These are people who have woken up at 3 a.m, 2 a.m, and there are armed people at their doors, at their gates. There are people who've been picked up in the city clandestinely. At whatever level it is, it has to stop.
That
And
has
there
to
has
stop.
to be a voice from the very top that speaks to it. Because we've said that this is a democracy and that people have a right to demonstrate. They have a right because
To
they
say
are
what they want to
sovereign
say.
to say what they want and need to say. They have a right to not be disappeared, if you can use that kind of English. So now, Senator, as you work in a position as an emissary, we have now bequeathed you that position. There needs to be something that's said about that, because it cannot take Kenya back to the dark days where people just disappear off the face of the earth and then come back a shell of themselves. It has to stop, and that message has to go across. People should be able to operate within their rights as Kenyans, and they are not breaking the law. This fear that is being instilled in the hearts of people has to stop, and it has to stop yesterday. It is too dark, Senator. So can you take that message? Let something be done about it. Not tomorrow. Today.
That one has to be done, and I feel sad about that, because we made promises about it, extrajudicial killings and use of police infrastructure to manage political situations. It featured prominently, and I have thousands of clips about things I said about it when we were on the other side, and that shouldn't be happening. And
This morning,
I hear you.
6 more people.
Can Parliament do something?
Maybe we should.
Can Parliament put a stop to this nonsense once and for all? Right? Because many of members of Parliament have been victim to this extrajudicial arrests. invasions into their privacy. The deputy president talks about it all the time. His home was invaded in the middle of the night. He was picked up, even not even allowed a moment to dress up. He has experienced it. The promise was it should not happen again. The cabinet secretary for the interior spoke yesterday, and his tone was not that of saying, you know what, we understand that you have not been violent, and we encourage you to continue being non-violent.
Yeah.
It was, I dare you to be violent.
No.
Can Parliament put a stop to this?
There must be a way, and has to be figured out. This is one of those bipartisan things that probably we need to close ranks about, because everybody across the aisle has been victim to, and you'd be a fool to imagine, especially the younger ones, that because I've seen when I first came to Parliament, I was on this side where I presently am. Last time I was on the other side.
Yeah.
This time I'm on this side. So it's a ping pong, and you never know. And there is no better point to perhaps seal all those loopholes than at this present time when there are responsibilities. Therefore, it's unfortunate that this is happening, and I hear you do. Let me commit to get it to the right ears.
It has to.
It shouldn't be happening.
Can we hold you to that, Senator?
Please do. Please do.
Okay. So today I want to thank you very much for joining us today. We'll open up the phone lines for our next conversation, because we want people to say, so as this conversation is happening, number one, what you're saying, there's a lot that's being said. Can we actually now start bringing it together into what
specifics.
What are we saying and what do we want to see going forward?
Yeah.
Because if you don't start thinking of the next steps, then there's a nice carnival atmosphere going on in the country. Where is it leading us to? How do we know that we have achieved what we wanted to achieve? How do we start shaping this conversation? How do other sectors also come in and contribute to this? How do we make sure that this movement is not abducted?
I see
the movement itself,
apart from the police,
can be abducted.
Abductions, political abductions also. I see politicians trying to take a ride on it, but have demonstrated it here that there are very few people who have the moral authority to speak on this problem, because either by commission or omission, there have been significant contributors into getting us where we are, and that's across the aisle. Therefore, it will be important that the purity of this.
So the solution should come from elsewhere.
Yes, the
Not
purity
from you-
of this
not from you lot.
movement shouldn't be interfered with by political interference. The only challenge is how to reduce these challenges that are being spoken into action points. Because like I pointed out, and the unfortunate thing is that you speak to some of the people, not all of them, some of the people, and they appear to be under the impression that once you reject the finance bill, all our problems disappear. It's not the case. And I have taken time to explain why that is not the case. I have said there are things that we will fix. We have to fix on the expenditure side. But then there are additional things that city is speaking to. That even these little resources that are available, what is our conviction that it's going to the intended purposes, speaking to the challenge of corruption, which is perhaps something that we need to discuss. Is the architecture of EACC and DCI and oversight institutions working as proposed, or there needs to be a radical shift? I believe that having tried it for 10 years, or in perhaps going to 14 years now, since the new constitution, it's clear the results can show that as proposed, it is not working. Something different has to be done if we're to win this war on corruption. And that is what now you're saying, that so that we don't lose the moment, how do we reduce all this into action points and say, this is perhaps the bigger thing also that people are concerned about, that there is wastage. Apart from the wastage, there's pilferage as well. How do we stop that? How do we make sure that we bring a corruption suspect to book within a certain period of time, so that you don't go through the rituals? People know that you can steal, and if you get caught, you'll be taken to court. Once you go to court, you can drag the case until you die, like some of the suspects, without ever having a return. There is new jurisprudence that is even emerging out of EACC, the Obado case, out of court negotiations, which we need to appreciate, and perhaps it's you to call them here and help them make you understand the logic in some of the decisions that they are taking, so that we don't lose that. Some of the things like opportunities being availed, it will take time, but it's clear from the voices that are speaking out there that the speed with which it is being done is not satisfactory. We are churning out very able and well-educated people who know their rights, who know what they need to do without opportunities. When there's constriction of space for opportunities, then things such as what is happening are bound to explode, and that's not what you want for your country.
Well, somebody's saying justice for Rex Masai.
For?
Rex Masai.
Or the young man who was
the
killed.
demonstrator who was shot, allegedly by a police officer, right? And in just a moment of high-handedness, which is where, again, the message, your former colleague in the Senate, Professor Kithure Kindiki, and the statement that he made yesterday. Well, on the face of it, he made a statement of fact. The law allows you to picket.
Yes.
And the law allows you to picket as long as you're doing it within the confines of the law.
I thought it was fair and balanced.
And the law does not allow you to move inside one side or the other.
Yeah.
What we felt that the good CS did not do is he did not acknowledge the fact that the demonstrations that we've seen in the country so far have been peaceful.
Largely
peaceful demonstrations. He did not acknowledge that. He did not acknowledge that the violence that we have seen so far has come from his officers. He did not acknowledge that the likelihood, the message that he'll be sending to the protesters should be, I acknowledge that you've been peaceful. I encourage you to be peaceful. I want to assure you that my officers will stand down this time.
But he said that
only acting.
He said
if
that
you go out. He did not acknowledge.
No. He said,
but you must make sure. It's a tone. Usually these things, the tone of voice.
But
if you come out and say,
I found his statement fairly balanced, to be honest, because he acknowledged that there is need for protesters to be allowed to do what they need to do. Police should actually provide escort for them, ensure that they exercise their right uninterfered with. But to counterbalance that, because this is Nairobi and this is Kenya, you know very well how sometimes in crowds they are infiltrators, People take advantage of such situations.
Yeah.
And credit to this current lot of demonstrators, I have seen them even open ways for people who want to go about their business, When they're on Kenyatta Avenue, they didn't try to block vehicles like has been in previous demonstration. And that is commendable.
Yeah.
The only problem, and I had this even in the preceding weeks or days before, they said when it gets to a certain time, if you're still out there, then you're not part of us. Because there are people who want to take advantage of these situations. And I felt that is a lot that the CS was addressing. There'll always be sneaky characters who will try and find ways of taking advantage of this situation. And they too needed to be addressed. I felt that's a lot that he was speaking to.
Yeah, I think he was speaking to them. But he should have been assuring the peaceful demonstrators of their security.
I'll tell him to be more assuring.
Well, Senator, it's 24 minutes past 9. Let's take this break to take a look at traffic weather. We'll open up the phone line 0719-012-600. So we are saying reject finance bill. Then what? What next? What are the next steps for this movement? Even the senators agrees that, it's actually a good moment in our country where we're having these conversations. Then how do we move it forward to make it meaningful and all?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.